Welcome to Arsenal, where the weapons and war machines of military history come to life. Today, we explore the M88 Hercules armored recovery vehicle in Operation Iraqi Freedom and modern armored warfare, and the crews who gave it its reputation. A longer version with fact sheets and photos is available in the print edition on LinkedIn or by email. You can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at trackpads.com.
The convoy has stopped, which is the last thing anyone wants on that Iraqi highway before dawn. Ahead, an M1 Abrams sits angled off the broken pavement, nose down in a soft shoulder that turned out to be more swamp than desert. Its tracks have dug in deep, the tank's turbine is silent, and the crew can feel both embarrassment and rising tension on the platoon net.
Headlights are kept low, red-lensed flashlights flicker, and out of the dark comes the squat shape of an M88A2 Hercules. It is not a pretty vehicle in the sleek sense. It looks like someone grafted a crane onto an old tank and dared it to go where the newer Abrams cannot. The Hercules grinds forward, dozer blade dropping to bite into the ground so it can anchor itself, tracks clattering over broken asphalt and scattered debris. The recovery crew moves fast and speaks only when needed. The big main winch cable snakes out from the hull, running through rollers and guides as hooks are passed in quick hand-to-hand relays across the mud. The Abrams driver watches the Hercules intently, almost willing it not to bog down in the same treacherous shoulder.
Within minutes, the Abrams is back in column, its crew chastened but grateful that their mistake did not end the mission. The Hercules rumbles off toward its next call, classified as a support asset on paper, but understood as a lifeline by everyone who relies on heavy armor. The Hercules keeps steel and crews in the fight when the terrain and the odds say they should be left behind.
Tanks are unforgiving machines in every era. When everything works, they can dominate ground combat by combining firepower, protection, and mobility. When something goes wrong, they turn into 70-ton paperweights, sitting in the worst possible places, bogged in mud, bellied on piles of rubble, mechanically dead in the middle of a narrow choke point, or knocked out under direct enemy observation. The cost was paid in lost vehicles, disrupted operations, and unnecessary risk to recovery crews.
Experiences from the Second World War and the Korean War had already shown that armored forces needed dedicated recovery assets built to match their tanks. As main battle tanks grew heavier from the M88 to the M60 and eventually to the Abrams, the gap widened between what existing recovery vehicles could handle on paper and what crews had to deal with in real terrain. Winches often lacked the pulling power required to move a fully loaded main battle tank stuck in mud or sand.
The Army's answer had to be a single armored, tracked recovery vehicle that could stay with tank battalions, maneuver in the same terrain, and haul or lift anything those battalions might break or lose. It needed to tow disabled tanks, winch them out of ditches, canals, and irrigation cuts, hoist heavy components for field repairs, and clear obstacles that blocked movement.
That demanding list of requirements drove engineers toward a solution based on a tank chassis with the mobility and protection that implied. They equipped it with a powerful main winch buried deep in the hull, auxiliary winches for handling the heavy cable, a serious crane mounted along the side, and a bulldozer blade that could act both as an earth mover and as a solid anchor. The first M88s were built on the bones of the tanks they were meant to rescue, using hulls from the M48 and M60 families. Designers gave them a low armored profile, a powerful main winch, a crane sprouting from the hull, and a dozer blade welded to the front to serve as both tool and anchor. These vehicles went to war in Vietnam, where they dragged damaged tanks and self-propelled guns out of rice paddies, jungle tracks, and bomb-cratered roads. As time passed, the tanks they were meant to save grew heavier and more capable. The arrival of the M1 Abrams late in the Cold War brought thicker armor,
a more powerful main gun, and a significant jump in weight compared with earlier designs. On paper, the existing recovery vehicles could still tow or winch in Abrams, but in practice, crews were working very close to the edge of what their equipment could safely handle.
Engineers focused on a handful of core improvements that would change how recovery operations felt in the field. They designed stronger main and auxiliary winches so the vehicle could pull harder and handle heavier, more awkward loads. They upgraded the crane so it could lift modern tank power packs and other large components without straining at every inch of travel. They refined the towing gear and strengthened the powertrain so the vehicle could drag a fully loaded main battle tank over long distances.
At a glance, the M88A2 Hercules is a tracked armored recovery vehicle built in the United States for the United States Army and the United States Marine Corps in the late Cold War and post-Cold War era. It typically carries a crew of 3, with space for additional personnel when needed, and its primary weapon is mechanical rather than explosive. The Hercules brings a heavy main winch, an auxiliary winch, a powerful crane, and a dozer blade that doubles as an earth mover and an anchor. Walking up to an M88A2, you feel at once that it is both familiar and different. It shares the squat, purposeful stance of a tank, but the details tell another story. The front glacis is dominated by the heavy dozer blade, waiting to be lowered into the soil or asphalt to dig in and hold the vehicle steady during hard pulls. Along one side of the hull, the crane sits folded against its mounts, booms secured until the crew needs to swing it out. The exterior gives the impression of a rolling toolbox built on a tank chassis. Every hook, shackle, and bracket has a job in a recovery plan. Crews know where each item belongs by muscle memory, because time wasted hunting for the right chain or adapter can mean more danger for everyone in the area. The Hercules is not shaped to slip unseen across a skyline, but to hold steady, haul straight, and absorb punishment while doing work that no other vehicle can. Inside, the layout feels familiar to anyone who has spent time in armored vehicles, yet it is clearly arranged around the recovery mission. The driver sits low in the front of the hull, looking out through periscopes in all but the safest conditions, and ready to pop his hatch for better visibility when the situation allows.
Communication is constant because mistakes can be deadly. Inside the hull, crew members talk over an intercom, keeping voices steady even when engines are roaring and winches are under strain. When hatches are open and people are working both inside and outside, shouted instructions cut through the noise, along with hand signals that crews practice until they feel automatic. It is a stream of distance calls, tension warnings, and small corrections.
At the heart of the Hercules is its main winch and crane system tucked deep within the hull. The main winch feeds a thick cable forward through rollers and guides, allowing the crew to route it to a disabled tank or other heavy load with precision. An auxiliary winch helps handle the weight and stiffness of that main cable or move loads into position without resetting the entire setup.
Behind the crew compartment, the engine and transmission sit in their own space, separated by bulkheads, yet very present in sound and vibration. When the Hercules is working hard, the whole vehicle hums and shakes with mechanical effort. The engine's growl deepens, the winch sings under tension, and even the floor plates seem to buzz. Every member of the crew can feel through boots and gloves how close they are to the limits of the machine, long before any gauge spells it out.
Life inside an M88A2 blends the cramped, noisy environment of any armored vehicle with the specific hazards of heavy recovery work. Crews train to move methodically, even when the clock is ticking. They practice checking chocks, anchors, and rigging under calm conditions until those checks become second nature in the dark or under stress. A short pause to confirm that a tow bar is pinned correctly or a shackle is seated can prevent a catastrophic failure when the winch takes up tension. In training areas, Recovery jobs are often carefully staged, with clear fields of view and generous time windows. A stuck vehicle might sit in a convenient shallow ditch, with instructors watching and radios quiet, except for range control. Under those conditions, crews can walk through each step, adjust techniques, and learn from minor mistakes.
In combat, the same tasks play out in ditches, on steep embankments, or in urban cluttered streets filled with debris and abandoned vehicles. Small arms fire may snap nearby, and the possibility of indirect fire or hidden explosives hangs over every minute. Recovery crews find themselves working in places where a stalled column is an invitation to enemy action.
The Hercules itself is not glamorous, but tank and mechanized infantry units know its true value. To them, it represents the difference between abandoning a disabled vehicle to enemy eyes and seeing it back in the line after repairs. In that quiet but vital way, the M88A2 Hercules holds a unique place in the story of modern armored warfare.
In that environment, the M88A2 was more than a support vehicle trailing politely behind the line of march. Recovery sections moved forward near the combat companies, ready to peel off the moment a call came over the net. During one push toward a vital river crossing, a battalion advance bogged down when multiple armored vehicles became stuck in soft ground near the approaches. Earlier M88 variants had already earned their combat stripes in Vietnam, dragging burned or broken tanks out of rice paddies and helping clear routes under fire. Those decades of experience taught crews how to position the vehicle, how much strain the winch could tolerate, and when to back off rather than risk snapping a cable or burying the Hercules itself.
To an outsider, a recovery like this might look like a simple tow operation. In military terms, though, it is a way of preserving combat power. Each tank or armored vehicle hauled out of danger is one less loss on a readiness report, and one more machine available for the next mission. Quiet work at the roadside becomes a decisive factor in how long a battalion can keep fighting without fresh replacements.
When you ask crews and maintainers what they value most about the M88A Hercules, their answers usually begin with confidence. It is armored, tracked, and powered well enough to go where tanks go, which means recovery teams are not stuck waiting on the edge of bad terrain while casualties sit exposed. The combination of a powerful main winch, an auxiliary winch, a crane, and a dozer blade gives the crew a toolkit that can be adapted to many different problems. There is also a powerful morale effect attached to this machine. Tank crews know that if something breaks far forward, they are not automatically facing abandonment or demolition of their own vehicle. The presence of a dedicated recovery vehicle that shares their armor and mobility changes how commanders think about risk and maneuver.
The Hercules, like any machine, comes with limitations that its crews know well. It is a large and heavy vehicle in its own right, which makes transport and bridging more complicated and places steady demands on fuel and maintenance. Its protection is substantial, but not equal to the latest tank armor, and in conflicts where roadside bombs or shaped charge attacks became common, recovery crews sometimes found themselves operating in environments where they were as vulnerable as any other support vehicle.
From an enemy perspective, a recovery vehicle like the Hercules is a high-value target. Disable or destroy it, and the opposing armored unit has a much harder time salvaging its own losses, which increases the long-term impact of every damaged tank. In some modern fights, adversaries learned to aim at the support tail as much as at the spearhead. It is heavy, armored, and purpose-built to handle the ugliest jobs that armored warfare creates.
The Hercules that worked Iraqi roads and training ranges in the early 21st century is the latest step in a long line of American armored recovery vehicles. The original M88 appeared in the early 1960s, built on the running gear of the standard tanks of that era and powered by a gasoline engine.
The leap to the M88A2 Hercules was driven by the Abrams weight class and the desire for more margin in recovery operations. The Hercules upgrade brought a strengthened main winch with greater pulling capacity, a more capable crane able to handle heavier power packs and other components, and enhanced towing equipment designed for modern battle tanks. Beyond United States service, there have been export and adaptation paths for the M88 family. Allied nations operating American-designed tanks or similar heavy vehicles have used M88 recovery vehicles in their own formations, sometimes with local modifications or specific equipment fits. Over time, incremental upgrades have appeared in the form of improved communications, navigation gear, and protection kits tuned to particular theaters and threats. The legacy of the M88 family, and of the Hercules in particular, is measured less in public recognition and more in the quiet continuity of armored operations. Modern doctrine assumes that heavy combat vehicles can be recovered, repaired, and returned to service, rather than written off at the first serious breakdown or battlefield hit. That assumption rests on specialized support machines like the Hercules, standing ready behind the front line. It underpins a certain kind of confidence.
Even as newer designs and technologies emerge, the basic idea of a tracked, armored recovery vehicle with winch, crane, and blade remains central to mechanized forces. The M88 line helped set that template, proving that recovery cannot be an afterthought handled by whatever trucks happen to be available. Instead, it has to be a deliberate capability built into battalion organizations, with crews who take pride in solving some of the nastiest mechanical and terrain problems their comrades can find.
For those who want to see an M88 up close, examples can be found at armor museums, on training ranges, and as static displays at posts where armored units have deep histories. Museum exhibits often place the recovery vehicle near the tanks it supports, emphasizing the close relationship between the two.
Behind every M88 Hercules are the crews who risk noise, mud, and enemy fire to bring other soldiers and their vehicles home.